What's up, everybody? Welcome to an episode of the Inking Out Loud podcast that we've been aiming at for 31 other episodes. That's right. I went back, I did the math, I counted every single episode we've done on a Robert Jordan book, and today we're on episode 31 in the Wheel of Time, but ultimately it's episode 64 of the Inking Out Loud podcast, and we have finally arrived at Tarmon Gai'don. I am your host, Rob Santos, and I'm joined as I always am by my co-host, Drew McCaffrey.
How's it going, everybody?
And now, buckle up, everyone, because we are in for one hell of a ride. Today we dedicate an entire episode to covering Chapter 37 of Robert Jordan and Brander Sander Habba Habba, A Memory of Light. I can't speak. Clearly I've been drinking before we started this episode. So, Drew, let's talk about the last battle. Would you care to give us a brief recap of the climactic War of the Ages?
So it will be very brief because there are really only two options with this chapter, and one of those options is to basically just do a blow-by-blow breakdown of 220 pages of text, which I'm not going to do. But essentially, this just is the majority of the Battle of the Field of Marilor, the last battle. We have points of view from probably over a dozen characters. I actually should have counted, but tons of points of view, tons of scene breaks. We have some major character deaths, and we have Swan goes down, Davram Bashir goes down, Brigida is killed, Elaine is captured, Fail goes down, Galad goes down, Gawain is killed, Egwene commits suicide in a massive one-power Flame of Tarvalon attack. It is just craziness. So.
Yeah. 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28 viewpoints.
Wow, okay.
That we have.
I even underestimated there.
Yeah. We have, and I will list them very quickly in order here. Not in order, but in order of their appearance. Lan, Elaine, Uno, Logain, Gawain, Tam, Pavara, Rand, Galad, Egwene, Fail, Perrin, Andral, Ruark, Sylviana, Min, Dimandred, Juilin, Fortuona, Bashir, Arganda, Oliver, Liana, Talmanis, Ela, Huron, Berelain, and Taim. Now, that's all from library.tarvalon.net. I just looked that up really quickly, so if there's an issue with that, take it up with them. Not your friendly host, Rob. So, yeah, it's been... Wow, reading the last battle, it was so surreal to do for the first time. Should we just begin chronologically? I'm going to start off the episode by saying, contrary to our usual routine, I don't have any style points in particular that I want to discuss. I'm sure we will be discussing style in some sort of organic, I hope, fashion later. But I don't have separate character entries. I don't have favorite scenes chosen yet. Since we're only covering one chapter today, no matter how long it is, I've just prepared a list of things I want to talk about, reactions I had to everything that we have happening at the culmination of the entire series proper. So we start?
I do have
Go ahead.
One style point, and I think it's a pretty large scale one, and it's a good place to jump off.
Okay.
And that is the decision to write this chapter.
Okay.
That this is
fair enough.
Whatever. I don't remember the exact word count, but it's 80 or 90,000 words. One chapter. It is longer than Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone.
Yeah.
Or the Sorcerer's Stone. It is a monster, and it was Brandon Sanderson's idea. I know there's a little bit of a misconception that still lingers around that Robert Jordan wrote this.
The entire scene or the entire chapter? That's.
No, yeah.
That's orders of magnitude more writing than he actually did.
As far as I know, he wrote none of this chapter. He wrote the epilogue, most of the epilogue. But
there are very specific things in this chapter, I think, that he planned for sure, yeah.
There are a few, although I'll get to that later.
So will I.
A surprising amount of it was from Brandon and Harriet.
Really?
Making decisions together, yes.
Oh, man, you piqued my interest on that one.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I want to talk about the decision to write this mammoth chapter and what it does as a discrete literary work, just this one chapter, and in the grand scheme of the larger A Memory of Light book and ask you like whether or not you think it landed. Obviously, the point of this chapter was to be a slog. It was supposed to be exhausting. It was supposed to be, just beating the reader down with this endless chapter. Because that's something that, whether readers realize it or not, there is a relief that comes when you're reading a book and you get to the end of a scene or you get to the end of a chapter and you see, like, when chapters stretch on longer than your usual, maybe 8 to 12 pages, when you start seeing chapters stretch on into like 20, 25, 30 pages. I mean, there's a reason why so many people complain about the prologues in The Wheel of Time, because some of them are 100 pages long. And yet, here we have the climactic chapter of the whole series, and it's a very specific decision to write it in this style, to write one massive chapter that just goes on and on and on and on, where it's full of things going poorly for our heroes until the very end.
Well, I think there's something to be said about the length of this chapter and the narrative purpose that it serves. This is something that we very briefly talked about previously, in that a lot of things are written in such a way, particularly in these last 3 books, to appear to give you exactly what you want, even though you're not entirely certain you want it. This is something I talked about actually in the very last episode, and how, yes, a lot of at one point Rand is directly talking to our characters, but in a real way he's talking to our readers as well, saying, oh, you want blood? You want battle? You want chaos? You want fighting? Trust me, you are luckier than you know right now, because before long you are going to get more than you can stomach. This was Rand talking to everybody in that scene, the reader included. And this chapter as a whole, with its length, really, really exemplifies that. I mean, I will be honest, when I was reading it for the first time, it took me longer than I care to admit to realize that it was still the same chapter. In a lot of ways that in some movie scenes, for example, that I've come to realize later, it's like, oh my god, that was one take? That was one single cut? And, right. and when you learn to appreciate those sorts of behind-the-scenes looks, it really adds a whole dimension to it. I didn't realize that we were still on the same chapter until almost halfway through, when we were like 100 pages in, and I was starting to consider, I was like, wait, there's no big cliffhanger yet. And that's when I realized we were still on the same chapter. So I think in a large part, it does what it's supposed to do very well. It brings the reader in, and the reader loses themselves. Overall, they don't really have that detached perspective. They are so invested, at least in my respect, I was so invested at that point that I didn't notice that it was all one long chapter until it really, really started to drag. But I saw the narrative purpose for it, and I appreciated it for what it was. And if for nothing else, for that final moment when we realize the chapter is over and you finally get to exhale and you finally get to breathe, and it's like, okay, the mountain has been moved.
Right.
Now let's budge that feather. I mean, I love this whole chapter. Would I have asked for it to be any shorter? No. But if you had explained to me just how long it was going to be as a young reader, I wouldn't have believed it. I would not have believed it.
Yeah, I remember in advance of the actual release of the book, there were, some screenshots leaked. Like Amazon always has their preview pages, and it always includes the table of contents.
Really?
And there was a little bit of consternation, I remember, in the fandom when The Gathering Storm came out and people saw the chapter list and saw the death of Tuon, and people were like, wait, what? And then again with A Memory of Light, when the chapter list came out and you see okay, chapter 37, A Memory of Light, and then you look at the page numbers, and chapter 37, A Memory of Light, starts on page 617 of the hardcover, and chapter 38 starts on page 807.
Yeah, okay. Oh my god. No, I imagine a lot of the posts were probably like, huh, I bet I caught a typo. There's got to be a typo in the final scene. And then a lot more of the intuitive fans probably went, well, if that's a typo, then the book's really not going to be that long.
No, at least as far as I saw, I didn't see anybody claiming typo. I just
No?
saw a lot of people going like, "Holy crap, that is going to be the most epic chapter ever."
Oh, it is
Like-
called The Last Battle. Now that I
Yeah.
think on it, they had some context for it being called The Last Battle. Yeah, no, this is something
Yeah.
I'm just providing a knee-jerk reaction on because I wasn't that part of the fandom back then. Or at least I wasn't paying attention to the intricacies online. Of course, you know what? No, that's actually a lie. I actually was in a small way, and I'm going to be bringing that back up later in the episode. But for now, let's get into the meat and potatoes of Tarmon Gai'don, The Last Battle. I want to talk about how we're starting here. Lan, obviously Lan is going to be a huge part of the last battle. If you had asked me beforehand, going into A Memory of Light, you have one character who you are going to guarantee is going to die in this volume, I would have said Lan Mendragoran.
I would
have
like
said-
to back up just a second.
Would you? No,
We
go
do
ahead.
Not start with Lan.
Why not? Okay, sorry.
We start with Loyal.
Oh, sorry. When I
start
say we,
with-
I'm an I. Like for go
Dawn
ahead.
broke that morning on Palov Heights, but the sun did not shine on the defenders of the light. Out of the west and out of the north came the armies of darkness to win this one last battle and cast a shadow across the earth, to usher in an age where the wails of suffering would go unheard.
We
From
have
the
an
book of Loyal, son of Arent, son of Halan, the fourth age.
epigraph in the middle, like at the beginning of a
Yes.
chapter.
Yes.
That's true. I hadn't considered that actually. That could have been actually a really cool style point to discuss too.
Yeah. That was going to be my segue into.
No, go for it, dude. Yeah, I
But
didn't consider
yeah,
that.
It's there. So there are two things here that stand out about this. One, it's unique. This is the only chapter epigraph we get in the Wheel of Time. And two, it says two things from the notebook of Loyal, son of Arent, son of Halan, the fourth age.
Yep.
Loyal is going to survive, and he's going to be writing from the fourth age if they win this battle.
Because I was going to add that caveat there. I was going to say, well, we've also seen viewings from Min, who is never wrong, right? But okay, I'm glad that you added that caveat there.
Yeah, so while we've always known, or we've had indicators throughout the series, that we will get to the fourth age. We have epigraphs all throughout the series from scholars in the fourth age. But this is the first one that is from a character we know writing from the fourth age. And that's a huge, huge signifier.
I love that it was Loyal too.
Yeah. But to your point, going back to Lan, who's the first point of view character, I agree with you. I thought he was going to die. And I want to try in this episode to avoid end of book spoilers because there are a couple of things that like really are only discussion points in the context of just this chapter, and Lan is one of them. It is exactly what you said. Going in, you know Lan is going to die. That's been his. It's been his character arc. It's been set up since the very first book. That like his whole thing is sacrificing his life in defense of the light. You know, like he has this fatalism written all over him. And so opening the chapter with Lan and ending the chapter with Lan killing Demandred but taking a mortal wound at the same time, you're like, okay, this is thematically perfect. Like this is the way to bookend the last battle.
Yeah, no, for sure. So for me, what it was that made me consider, not made me consider, that made me concrete in the fact that Lan was going to die, was the fact that one of Min's viewings beforehand had been Rand performing a Borderland funeral. Him pouring rocks on sand. Well, that was the actual viewing. Him pouring rocks on sand with his hands.
Water on sand.
Yeah, why am I saying rocks? Water on sand, yes. Him pouring water on sand with his hands. And then we learn, I think it was actually in New Spring, which is a novel we really haven't referred to until now. I think it was in New Spring that we learned that is a Borderland, particularly I think it was a Malkieri funeral. So that made me go, oh, well that doesn't spell a lot of gold for Lan's future. So going into this, seeing that it started off with Lan as a point of view character at the very beginning, I thought, yeah, Lan is definitely going to die.
the way this is written is we start with Lan opening the last battle and end with Lan dying to end the last battle. Right?
True.
Like, and that is what I'm talking about, a thematically perfect bookend to this. And we can discuss the aftermath of that in our next episode, because there's going to be a lot to discuss about that. But it's like, it was a really, really clever point of view choice, like you said, because of this series-long build-up with Lan, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, it would be easy to open the last battle chapter with Rand. You know, it would be easy to open the last battle chapter with Matt or Egwene. But with Lan, it's both a bold move and a perfect one. And to close with Lan is both bold and perfect.
Yeah. I mean, if there's one character to do it with, I mean, with Rand, I probably would have said, yeah, of course, it would have to be Rand. But Lan is just so thematically appropriate for this. Like Rand is the one who is going to face the Dark One, but it is Lan. You know, it is Lan who is going to fight. It is Lan who is going to inspire men. It is Lan who is going to 1v2 to Myrddraal and kick both of their asses. It is Lan that's going to inspire mankind to keep fighting in their most desperate moment of need. And I thought it was just so cool. I would have bet money that he was going to die in this scene. I would have bet money.
And it has been Lan the entire series who is the emblem of fighting the futile, delaying battle against the Shadow.
Yeah, but the one that you cannot give up on.
Yeah.
Lan is the paragon. Like, he is everything about that. And I mean, I'm just glad that I'm not left from the last battle walking away with a sense of unsatisfaction. I am glad that everything I wanted to get out of Lan as a character happened in this chapter, especially with those final words. The final words that he thought he was going to hear in this world when he was thinking about that lesson that he gave to Rand on sheathing the sword to accomplish your goal. Mm-hmm. I am so glad that came around full circle, all the way from the beginning of the Great Hunt to the end of the last battle. It was such a great callback, and this is something that this is actually, I said it was going to happen at the end of the episode, but I think it's happening right now. When I said I was going to talk about something that has Robert Jordan's fingerprints all over it, we have to assume this is Robert Jordan that planned. Lan is going to 1v1 Demandred, and it's going to be his lesson to Rand about sheathing the sword that wins the last battle. Right?
I don't know.
Because that has Robert Jordan all over it, does it not? I think it does.
I think you could make a good argument for that. I'm going to do a little quick, very, very quick search to see if there are any quotes about that. But you can keep talking while I do this.
Yeah, no, definitely. Sorry, right now, actually, what I'm doing is I'm on the Inking Out Loud Facebook group, and I'm looking at our comments on the post that I made about anybody wanting anything for us to discuss during this particular episode. We have a few responses. We'll get to those later. But for now, I guess I will go on. That's the only concern I have is my rest of my points go on from there, and I feel like I would leave you behind since you're looking up something that has contextual basis in what we're doing right now. My next points are about Swan, Pavara, and Androl. But I do want to say, first off, rest in peace, Swan Sanche. Like, it was really interesting to note that, and I guess this might be more of a style discussion, if anything else. We're finally aware that a lot of gruesome stuff is happening behind the scenes. Like, we've known that the entire time, but we know there's Trollocs butchering people. And vice versa. People are butchering Trollocs. We know there are Dragkar that are literally sucking people's souls out of their bodies and consuming them. We know this balefire erasing very souls from existence. And we know in the deepest parts of our fandom here that there are Trollocs cooking human body parts and eating them. Presumably in a lot of scenarios where the humans are alive as well. But we're still not seeing a lot of graphic content in the battles themselves, and Swan Sanche is the character I chose to focus on this for, because with her death, for example, she died in an explosion But the only thing that we get from Min, the only thing that Min sees is Swan's dead eyes staring upward. Do you feel, you personally, Drew McCaffrey, do you feel there was a lot of horror to the last battle as much as you were expecting as a younger man? Or perhaps were you expecting something a little grittier?
I don't know if I really had an expectation of grittiness.
I thought I was going to get real myself. Like, I was ready to white knuckle my way through this.
I wouldn't say that my expectations were missed when I read this. I think it met my expectations.
Yeah. I don't want to say it missed my expectations either. But I don't know. I feel like if this had been done from Robert Jordan's point of view, it would have been, I don't know, just a tad bit darker. Just the littlest bit. Particularly, I was going to say with Shaider Haran, but that's completely aside the point. That's the one that really scared me. Have you found what you were looking for?
Not yet. I did see that the Shara, Battle of the Wild reveal was Brandon's, but nothing about Demandred versus Lan. Yeah. So I don't know.
It's just something that, for me, so personifies Robert Jordan as a person, as an author, when he was writing The Great Hunt, and it was Lan giving Rand that almost fatherly advice, and everything about sheathing the sword to accomplish your goal, and the fact that the last battle itself ends on that exact note, with that exact sentiment, made me feel that Robert Jordan was supremely behind this final scene, in that he might not have written it word for word, but somewhere in Robert Jordan's notes, I'm sure somewhere in Robert Jordan's notes was Lan kills Demon Dread and his final lesson to Rand, or something along those lines.
I would not be surprised. I have some reservations about that, but I will discuss those next week.
Okay.
Because they depend on things that happens after.
Got you.
But yeah, overall though, the scene itself is outstanding, and whether it was Brandon or Robert Jordan, it was a very nice callback. It was thematically appropriate. I vividly remember when I read this scene the first time. We were all out in Provo for the midnight release. It was the day after, the day of release, and we were at a Denny's or an IHOP or something across the street from our hotel eating, and of course we all had our books at the table.
Did you?
And I was sitting
that sounds
on
like such a good memory.
On the edge of the booth, and I full on I was being a little dramatic, but I tipped over out of my seat, and everybody else, I was the furthest into the book among the four of us who were there, and they were all yelling at me for being dramatic. And
what, because of something that you read and you were playing it up because you just wanted to screw with them, like you do with your buddy Rob when you text him, in the middle of a work day saying, "Oh, hello, Demon Dread."
No, I mean, it was less screwing with them and more just holy cow, what an incredible moment that I had this reaction.
So presumably you would say at that point you would have been the furthest, and I'm just going to try to riff off of that, extrapolate from that. You would have been the furthest one in, but it would have just been just newly released. I'm thinking you probably were still in the prologue. It might have been Graendal sipped at her wine. That might have been the moment, perhaps. I should have asked you that. Do you remember what moment that was? Because that would have been presumably before we got to this part, so we could talk about it.
Was in the Denny's?
Yeah.
No, it was when Lan killed Demandred. That's what I was saying.
Oh, you were already at that point in the Denny's? You were already 3/4 of the way through the book?
Yeah, it was the following morning.
Oh, the following morning. Sorry, I thought it was
it's
that night. Okay.
Yeah, I said so we went to the midnight release, and then it was the day of the release. After the... Yeah.
Got you. I misunderstood that part. Okay. I thought you were still at the very beginning of the book. Still, though, that's... Okay, I see. Yeah, that must have been fun to play with their expectations in that way, though, wasn't it? Admit it.
So it wasn't a conscious thing. I wasn't trying to screw with them. It was
really?
I actually had this reaction to reading that scene, and they were all yelling at me to, knock it off.
Oh, wow. Well, I mean, hey...
Because it was just so awesome. It was such a great moment.
First off, I mean, what are you going to do? Suppress that fangasm just because your friends are nearby? No. And also, hype up the expectation. That's awesome. No, I can absolutely see that.
Yeah, and if I remember right, they were all, either in the last battle chapter or getting close to it. So it was like they knew that it was something in the last battle that I was reacting to.
Awesome. So one of our reader questions actually has something to do with something that I wrote down to already discuss, and that was from
nice.
Simon Flesher, who says Androl's and Pavara's bond and how they can use each other's talents and powers. My point about this was very, very similar, and I just wrote down, interesting to see Pavara using Androl's talent for gateways. The two-way bonding is a source of so much hard magic gold, and I'm interested in knowing if Jordan had any notes about how such a mutual bonding would work. Was this perhaps Brandon's take on how that would work, answering perhaps a lot of fan questions he had seen? What do you take away from this, Drew?
My takeaway is that I am nearly positive this was all Brandon. I don't think Robert Jordan had any plans for a double bond this way. I think this is Brandon extrapolating on the previously existing magic system, and I can understand why some fans would not like this, because it
Has there
feels
been
a little
a sentiment like that?
Oh yeah.
Really?
Because it feels a little bit like a Deus Ex Machina. It's like it's a completely unheard of new magical ability that comes along in the last book.
Yeah, but it doesn't really affect the entirety of the plot, so I would say that doesn't qualify for Deus Ex Machina.
Except if this didn't exist,
the seals.
The Black Tower doesn't get resolved. Logain gets turned. The seals are broken. So many things get fixed because of this double bond. I almost guarantee that had Robert Jordan finished writing the series, the Black Tower sequence with Logain versus Taim and all that would have gone very differently.
Oh yeah. No, so I hadn't actually considered the fact that if Androl and Pavara hadn't formed this bond, their entire heist, if you want to call it a mini heist of retrieving the seals, would not have actually succeeded. I didn't consider that, so I can see the legitimacy in saying that it's a bit of a Deus Ex Machina.
And on top of that, the whole heist scene is pure Brandon Sanderson. The whole idea of a mask of mirrors on top of a mask of mirrors is 100%. That's
Brandon especially because you have one character, and for me, what it was one character that needs to make sure the entire audience follows what's happening, and so they have to state the obvious. And this kind of frustrated me just a tiny bit. It didn't really pull me out of the moment, but it was Androl saying, "You're gonna make me look like Androl." He has to make sure that he explains the joke to the reader. I was in that moment. I wasn't rolling my eyes, but I was just the tiniest bit pulled out of the moment, going, "Okay, yeah, we get it." But
yes,
I hadn't considered that. But see, what makes me consider the alternative, and the alternative being that Robert Jordan perhaps had a lot to do with this, is that I imagine this is a question that Robert Jordan was badgered about endlessly. What would happen if a male channeler and a female channeler bonded each other? If you look back at it, it's such an obvious question to ask that I bet Robert Jordan was badgered about that. Perhaps that was one of his least favorite questions because of how often he probably was badgered about that. So I imagine Robert Jordan would have had to at least entertain that notion and plan a preemptive answer to that.
I do not recall, at least among the many, many interviews and questions recorded on Theoryland, I do not recall any questions about a mutual bond in that way.
See, I would not have thought to ask that. It surprised me when I read it for the first time. But in retrospect, it seems obvious to ask that question, doesn't it?
I mean, there are tons and tons of bond questions about is it possible to bond a Murdral, or
But nobody thought to ask, what if a man and woman bond each other? We have male channelers and female channelers. I don't know.
I haven't seen it. There's a lot of questions about the difference between a man bonding a man, a woman bonding a woman, a man bonding a woman. The different setups there. But I haven't seen one being what if an Aes Sedai and an Ashaman bonded each other?
Well, I will still admit what I said the first time. I didn't think of it. I didn't think to ask it myself.
Yeah.
But that was a great question. Oh my God, I can't speak. A great question from Simon.
Yeah, questions about, like, is it possible to pass
magic.
a warder or any bond to a non-channeler? And he rafoed that. Yeah, but he doesn't really talk about talks about like what happens to bonds when they go into steading.
Really? He managed to talk about what happens to bonds when they go into steading, but he never mentioned anything about mutual bonds between male channelers and female channelers. Well, I mean, I guess
people asked him about the warder bond and the steading.
I guess he wouldn't have had to explain that about anything during the Age of Legends because the warder bond didn't exist during the Age of Legends. That's also something that we want to make sure we note. The warder bond is something that even the Forsaken are surprised by. They had never seen anything like that.
Okay.
Anyway.
Yeah, there's
it's food for
some
thought.
really, really interesting things in there. But yeah.
I do want to talk a little bit about Matt and his role in the last battle. I don't actually have a lot about Matt and his role in the last battle, even though arguably he has the biggest role in the last battle. But there was one point at which I was very fed up with Matt. And by extension, I was fed up a little bit with Brandon at this point. And it was during Matt's note to Gilad. Where he's taking all of the time in the world while he's undoubtedly stressed to get orders sent out in time to add extra words just to make fun of Gilad and just to poke fun and just to keep adding jokes in his written language as well as his spoken language. And it's like, dude, I can see Matt somewhere in like a command center that's on fire and there's people screaming orders and there's channelers nearby and explosions, and he's taking all the time in the world, extra valuable seconds out to add an extra line where he finds a way to make fun of people. It's like, Matt is still pragmatic enough to oversee everything that's happening. To me, it felt like a little too much, I don't know, a little too stereotypical Matt like an easy way out, just to try to add some humor into a scenario where it wasn't really necessary. So wanted to ask what you thought about that. Does Matt joke too much?
Yeah, I do think he does. This is one of those situations where like it still remains Brandon writing Matt, and trying to make Matt a comic relief character when that's not what Matt is.
It's a discordant note amongst the symphony that is the last battle. It's like it stands out to me a little bit.
I mean, I think it's funny we're kind of like criticizing a lot of little things in here, but
I know,
a lot to praise. I mean, there's a lot to praise. By and large, I think this is a very well executed chapter.
Oh, yes. In fact, I talk about the things that I don't like more often just because it's so hard to find these things, honestly, from an author like Brandon Sanderson. But there are little ways in which that he inserts his style into the Wheel of Time that, I don't know, feels... it didn't feel quite what we had been expecting. And this is one of those ways. But there, like, as you said, there are so many things that Brandon did that were fucking incredible. And I still definitely want to get on some of those. But is there anything that comes to your mind right away before I continue? Because I realize I've been talking quite a bit at this point. I have everything to glow about, a few things to complain about. But I want to see if you want to propose a subject of discussion before I continue.
Well, kind of sticking on that topic of like Brandon's style creeping in, and you know how like it's like discordant sometimes, but sometimes it's not discordant and it fits, even though it's very patently Brandon. And one of those to me was Talmanis and the dragons, where they hid them in this like cavern with no entrances. This was a thing.
It was genius, wasn't it?
Purely like it's a Brandon Sanderson-esque twist, but it fits so seamlessly into like what the characters would do. Like it makes sense for them to decide this, not only like in the strategic picture, but for those specific characters. Like it works. It isn't him changing a character to act in a Brandon Sanderson way. It was taking the characters and adding a Brandon Sanderson like plot point that fits with their already existing, thought processes.
So what did you think about that additional verse of Jack of the Shadows? I loved it. I loved every single word of it. We give a yell
Yes.
and a bloody curse and hug the maids, it could be worse, as we ride away with the Dark One's purse to dance with Jack of the Shadows.
Yes.
That
So
is
that was
so Band of the Red Hand. Oh.
Yep, and that was like kind of where I was going with this. Like,
Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to steal your thunder.
It's a brand. No, not at all. You fit right in. It is like a very clearly Brandon Sanderson edition, but it fits with the already established Robert Jordan story and characters, where throughout the course of these books, since the first time we heard Jack of the Shadows and Fires of Heaven, there have been new verses added on.
Yeah.
You know, we get the scenes in Mayerone where Matt thinks about how the Band of the Red Hand is like coming up with new verses and so it just makes sense. It makes sense. And it's beautifully done.
Can I just say, this is something that I did not actually write down to discuss right now, but it's something I just thought of. This is something that could only have been written by a fan of the Wheel of Time. Only somebody who truly understands, pardon me, who truly understands the soul of the Band of the Red Hand and everything they stand for, could write a verse like this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. When it comes down to it, sure, there are some criticisms to be had about, like, oh, Brandon was too much a fan. Like, this is too fan servicey at certain points. But ultimately, having somebody who was a fan and knew the Wheel of Time and had read the Wheel of Time over and over again was the only way this could be satisfactorily completed.
Yes.
It was the only way.
The personal touch is the best touch, regardless of anything else that I have said. I mean, I cannot argue with that. And I cannot think of anybody else who could have done this on the level that Brandon Sanderson could have had. I want to talk about Ruark real quickly.
Oh, Ruark.
I'm really bummed. My man Ruark, done as cold as he was. I mean, I will challenge you, and I will challenge anybody else who listens to this podcast, or even this segment of the episode. I challenge you to name one time in the entirety of the series of the Wheel of Time that Ruark was anything but the perfect gentleman, clan leader, and father figure.
Oh yeah,
he did not
fantastic.
deserve to go out the way he did. Taken by Graendal's compulsion. I am glad that, of course, it was of all people, it was Aviendha that took mercy on him in typical Aiel fashion, as we see, having seen Gaul do the same thing in the previous episode. But I think it would have been a better use of the whole true love overpowers compulsion shtick, perhaps coming from somebody who's as amateur as I am, by using it to maybe to save Ruark instead of just seeing Aviendha as a daughter figure, rather than the way, to me, that feels a little forced later on, not to go into spoilers for the next episode. I don't know. But I'm a huge fan of Ruark. I hadn't had much of a chance to say that in this series proper, but I'm saying it, unfortunately, now, at his death. Rest in the light, Ruark. You did your people well.
Yeah. Oh, that was definitely one of the moments in this chapter that hit me the hardest. Most of the deaths, I will admit, did not hit me super hard. Partially that's because I didn't particularly care for most of the characters who died, at least who died like on screen in major scenes. There were a couple characters that I wish got a little more of a scene, but I understand the decision making, like with Swan.
Right. I can think of a few myself.
Where let's be honest here. This is the middle of a war. People will just die. Like, they just up and die. Not every character is going to get like an epic send off.
Yeah.
And so, but the two major characters who do get these epic send offs are Gawain and Egwene, and I don't particularly care for either of these characters. So for me, Gawain, it was more just like anger. It was like, dude, like, you were an idiot in life and you were an idiot in death. Like,
I'm sorry, I don't mean to make fun of that by laughing, but I have to draw this point right here while you're on that point, Drew, and say that a commenter, a listener, C. Roughton, has just said those words. I'd like to hear you guys explore Egwene's death. He literally just said those words as you were saying that. So I had to interrupt there. I apologize. I didn't mean to interrupt your flow, but I figured it would have been appreciated later.
Well, so with Gawain, there's like this little whimper of an attempt to redeem his idiocy, where like Galad, finds him as he's dying, and he tells Galad, "Hey, you have a brother. Don't hate him." Like,
yeah.
But it's like that seems so much like too little, too late.
Well, we got a little bit of that last episode, or last book, I should say. He at one point, he said to Elaine, like he was in that scene with Elaine, and he gave up on his hatred for Rand. We already got that bit of closure from Gawain. So to me, like you said, it felt a little, too little, too late.
But what's more important for Gawain in this book is his idiocy with the rings, and like...
Listener Kyle Pollock, Gawain attacking Demandred. Heroic or selfish? They are literally commenting on the things we are talking about as we are talking them in the moment. I can't believe this is happening right now. Shout out to C Route and Cy Route, and I apologize if I get your name wrong. And Kyle Pollock, you guys, that was amazing.
And so like Gawain just went out like a chump, and he lived like a chump. Like,
unfortunately, I would have wanted more for him.
With Egwene, okay. So this is a major scene. She is the only one of the Two Rivers Five who dies. She stands out. She stands alone in that regard. What the death scene for her does is perfect in a thematic sense. To me, at least, with the way I read her character, where she is, when you drill right down to the base of who she is a very driven woman who aspires to ever greater heights and wants to do good, but doesn't always go about it in the best way.
I agree with that 100%. If someone were to summarize everything about my feelings about Egwene, I think that would be the perfect way to say it. You nailed it.
And so her dying in this manner is perfect for the way she lived, because she is striving to fix an evil in the world, and she goes about it in a way that is self-destructive, but it is specifically self-destructive where she is reaching for too much power.
She is a martyr. She is a selfish martyr. In a way, a selfish martyr, in a way.
I'm not saying it's selfish of her in what she did here.
I also
but the symbolism of dying, drawing too much of the power is perfect for who Egwene was. Well, she was always the one reaching for more power.
You also consider the parallel between her and Aemon's wife. I can't remember her name all of a sudden. How did she die? She died in a very similar fashion. She was drawing too much of the...
Aemon. Oh, sorry. The way you said that is pronounced the same way as Aemon, like the Xel'Naga devil in StarCraft 2.
Oh, sorry. Aemon.
Yeah. That threw me off. You're thinking about Eldrine,
Eldrine, yes. Yeah, in Warring's story from one of the first scenes that we got to discuss in the Wheel of Time.
Very clear parallel there. Yep.
Very clear parallel there, and I was a big fan of it. And I thought it was, again, another full circle journey. A lot like Lan's character and how he, to us, in a huge fatherly way, opened up with a theme and chose to, if he needed to, end his life on that theme. With Egwene, we see a lot of the same thing with her parallel with Eldrine, and I thought it was moving, it was spectacular, it was totally badass. I cannot deny that Egwene was a huge badass in this scene.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, she takes out how many 100 Sharan channelers? She takes out Taim, it's really a spectacular scene.
Despite all of the bitching I had about Egwene in the past, and the bitching I'm sure I'm going to do in the future, I still have to give her this much respect. She went out like a boss. And I mean literally. Yeah. I bet the Sharans were hearing boss music when she arrived for that last time. To kill Taim and to die herself if need be with Vora's sa'angreal. Can you imagine what that was like to be from the Sharans' point of view? There's boss music in their head. I guarantee you there's boss music in their heads. It's like something straight out of Doom.
I want to just share another little anecdote that I will never forget from when A Memory of Light came out. On the old, Wattmania and then Read and Find Out, there was a particular user there whose screen name was Cannoli, and he was not a fan of Egwene, to put it very lightly.
Fair.
He wrote an entire series of articles called Egwene is Evil.
Oh, wow.
And it had like a scene by
okay.
scene, line by line breakdown of everything she does in the series that is awful. And he went way overboard. I mean, he did have a lot of very good points in it, but he also went way overboard. Like, I don't think you're going to find many people who actually believes Egwene is an evil person. But
no,
he pointed out, like, the value in his series of articles was that he pointed out a lot of the flaws in Egwene's character that people tended to miss because they would read into the point of view trap. They would accept her at face value because they're in her head, and instead of taking a step back and judging her actions and thoughts in a greater context. So it had value to it. But when this particular guy finished A Memory of Light, he posted a review of it, of course, as many people did on the forums back then.
Okay.
And he had, he had a whole breakdown thing, and he didn't say a word about Egwene in the entire thing. He had probably like 4,000 or 5,000 words. Didn't say a word about Egwene.
I'm sure that stood out.
You get to the end, and there's one last line, and it's just, "Ding dong, the witch is dead."
What the hell, man? Okay, so I got a little more context now for something that you said a little while back, too. You said something very similar about her. I can see the point where the inspiration you took there at one point. Yeah, no, Egwene. Oh, my God. I mean, come on. She wasn't evil. She wasn't
she was not
terrible
evil.
Character. At no point did I argue, or did you argue, or do we honestly feel that Egwene was not looking out for the best for everyone? Well, besides perhaps herself.
Ooh.
First amongst equals. But she was looking out for herself in a larger part. But she did not have any malicious intents. There's nothing.
Yeah, she was not an evil person.
Sinister about.
She was a selfish person, who had occasional bouts of selflessness, but she was ultimately, like, her selfishness was generally geared toward what she viewed as the greater good.
Yeah.
Her
opinion on the greater good.
There are just some differences in morality there, where there's some do the ends justify the means kind of things going in there, and
a lot like what I said about Gawain. She did everything with her heart, but maybe her heart wasn't always in the right spot.
Yeah. Yeah, but
they're perfect for one another.
Despite that, I do think this was a very well executed ending for her character. It was a very satisfying character arc in terms of, like, where she starts at, where she ends at. Everything makes sense. She didn't dramatically, like, take a left turn as a character. There was a very gradual, well-constructed progression of who she became as a person, and it ended in a place that just fits, both for the character and symbolically.
God, this is so surreal, because it's just occurring to me now that this is likely the last time that we talk about Egwene.
Yeah, it may be. Oh no, we'll talk about her a little more in the next episode.
Will we? Okay.
Yeah.
I want to say I'll change the subject a slight bit, and I'll say I was getting a little frustrated at the amount of 1v1 duels with Demandred.
Yes.
By the time that Lan charged him, I was saying quite literally the exact same thing that Demandred was. What? Like, another? Seriously? I mean, okay, obviously Lan is the one that I would have picked to go against Demandred solo with Bare Steel, if you had asked me beforehand. But after we'd already seen Gawain and then Galad fail to kill him, we kind of got the point. Demandred is a badass. And I know the point of this particular scene is not that Demandred is a badass, but it was overshadowed for me by the fact that it was our third time seeing it. Looking back, I feel like this scene could have been far more hyped going in if perhaps we had only seen one character on the Blade Master level try this and then fail. It leaves me thinking that one of these Demandred duels shouldn't have happened. Which leads me to the obvious question, which duel? And the answer is obviously Gai'don. Right?
Yeah, yeah. I think what you are hitting on here, though, is a symptom or an example of one of the very few large-scale criticisms I have of this book, the way it was executed, and that, without going into more detail, because I'll cover this next week, there is a tendency to have these, like, the same story beat hit 1, 2, 3 times. 1, 2, 3 times. 1, 2, 3 times. And where the first time it's like, oh, whoa, crazy. And then the second time you're like, oh, okay. And the third time you're like, oh, this again? You know, and so it's not just the duels, but the duels are probably the most blatant example of it.
Okay, so there are other examples of it. I can't think of another example particularly that has 3 instances. Like,
yeah, I'll bring it up next episode.
Okay. Oh, okay.
Because 2 of the 3 instances of this happen. Actually, 3 of the 4 instances of it happen in the next.
Okay,
part.
That's fair.
So,
that's fair. I'll continue on my feelings about Gai'don here, though, so we can wrap up his character too. I wrote down, dude, Gai'don, like, what are you doing? I hated everything about this scene. The fact that he decides to try the Blood Knives Terangrial, the fact that he decides to try them not out of desperation, for example, to save Egwene in a moment of need, but because he's frustrated at not being able to kick enough ass. You know, I came out of Towers of Midnight for the first time, finally ready to turn the page on Gai'don and start appreciating him more. After, like, think about what he did. He saved Egwene's life in a spectacular fashion. He gave up, like I said, in that scene with Elaine. He gave up on his hatred of Rand, realized his folly, and then in this 1 minute, he decides, nah, I'd rather be just a total child and commit, practical suicide because nobody appreciates me enough. I think he should have known what his chances were and what that would do to Egwene. As much as I have railed against Gai'don for and continued to stick up to him, or for him, grudgingly stick up for him for, his last decision in life was to prove Egwene right about every I can't speak, oh my god, every flaw that he has. He thinks of only the person and not of the station. He proves her right till the very end. If sitting through the last battle in a chaise and eating grapes was what was required of him to save Egwene the suicidal pain of his death, he should have been able to make that sacrifice, I think. But instead, he decides to risk it all on a childish tantrum. I thought, like, what an idiot. The only thing I regret about his death, there's only one thing. The only thing I regret is that he didn't manage to win. But that's besides the point. I mean, Gai'don is a real badass with the sword. He's probably might be outmatched by Gilad, but you have to remember, he's improved significantly since he killed Hamar and Kulin. But you also have to consider the fact that he had not 1 but 3 Blood Knife Terangrial at the moment. He should have killed Demandred. The Forsaken is still just a human being after all. If Demandred was going to use the 1 power in his duel, okay, I can see Gai'don dying. But as
he did.
Demandred said, he
was
throwing
with rocks.
He was throwing clods and stuff like that. But I don't know. I just feel like Gai'don, obviously he wasn't as good as Gilad, who probably isn't himself as good as Lan, but Gai'don is still close enough that with the aid of those 3 rings, he should have been able to at least bloody him. I thought in that moment that Demandred was a bit of a Gary Stew. He was just way too powerful. No human could be that good.
I think you have a pretty fair argument there. I didn't have that problem personally, but especially because, like, yes, Gai'don is a blade master, but based on the events of the series and some things that have come out of the notes, like, he was on the low end of blade masters.
Sure, but
Gai'don was,
yeah,
but more importantly, that he was overconfident. He didn't think he was on the low end, and that overconfidence, as we see with Demandred, overconfidence can be fatal.
Yeah, and this is a something I brought up as a gripe back all the way in The Great Hunt Part 2, I think, with Rob Winchell, when I was just arguing about the
Turak.
Yeah, with the Blade Master duel with Turak, and about what a Blade Master means. This could just be a reader error in just that I hold a Blade Master on way too high of a pedestal. But I feel like any Blade Master, regardless of whether or not they're at which end of the spectrum they're on, if they qualify for the title of Blade Master, and they have 3 rings on, they should have been able to at least bloody Demon Dread. That just felt a little too inhuman from somebody who was ultimately portrayed in the end as dying because of their humanity.
Yeah.
I don't know.
On the other hand,
yes.
I would like to point out the selflessness of Aegeanin, or Lyelwyn.
Yes.
In offering herself as a warder, a replacement warder, to help stabilize Egwene.
Yes.
In the aftermath of Gawain's death there. I also thought this was a really clever and fitting resolution to Egwene's prophetic dream from a couple of books ago. From, I believe it's the beginning of Knife of Dreams, or maybe it's in Towers of Midnight, or no, not Towers of Midnight.
I thought you were going
Crossroads
to say
of Twilight, where Egwene has her 2 dreams, one where she's climbing a mountain and the path starts crumbling from underneath her, and a Shanshan woman with a sword on her back climbs down to help her and saves her, and then the other one with the lantern with the white flame, and 2 ravens fly out of the darkness and hit it, and it doesn't go out, but it sheds a lot of oil, and it's dangerous.
10 or 11, something like that. Yeah,
I believe it's in Crossroads of Twilight, because she tells the Aes Sedai, as soon as she's captured and wakes up in the carriage in Knife of Dreams, she tells Katarine about it. She's like, you gotta listen to me, you're gonna get attacked by the Shanshan, blah blah blah. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
But yeah, like I said, it's a satisfying conclusion to that dream prophecy.
Definitely. I really quickly want to discuss, I know I'm kind of beating that horse into the ground, if you want to call it that, but Galad's duel with Demon Dread. I thought that was far better than Gawain's. He didn't... Sorry, go on.
I thought the scene itself was better. I have an issue with the aftermath of it, but I'll bring that up kind of on the next episode.
Okay, fair enough. I want to say...
I did like how Galad went about it with a different mindset.
Yes.
And a different methodology, really. He was much more thorough about it. He was much more prepared, which you would expect of Galad.
He was straightforward. He didn't attack Demon Dread from behind, which would have been unsatisfying if he'd won. I can see why Gawain did it. I mean, you're fighting the Forsaken. Honor at that point is not as important as winning. But Galad didn't choose to do that, which would have been unsatisfying. He didn't risk the emotional sanity of the Amyrlin with that decision, besides that point. And he was confident and straightforward until the end. Do we fight, Son of Shadows, or do we talk? I love that line. I so wish that Galad had been the only one that we saw duel Demon Dread in a 1v1 until Lan showed up. I think personally it would have been just enough to show how skilled Demon Dread is without risking a jaded reader, if you want to call it that, by the third and most important duel. I was glad to see him actually draw blood. I was glad to see him lock up with Demon Dread and literally try what I thought was really cool, a really nice touch, to try and outmuscle one of the strongest channelers of all of the ages. Galad managed to survive the duel, I thought, with more honor than Gawain showed dying from it.
Mm-hmm.
So, I thought, big thumbs up there for Galad.
I'll agree with that. Galad in general, I just really like him as a character.
I didn't at first, but I appreciate him a lot more now.
Yeah, it's funny to think about how Galad and Gawain were received in Eye of the World, where Gawain seemed like the cool brother,
yeah,
and Galad was like the uptight, like killjoy, and then as the series goes on, you realize like, well, wait a second, Galad's like actually the smart one.
Galad is steady.
Yeah, he
never wavers.
He makes one decision that's pretty questionable, and that's joining the Children of the Light. But he makes that decision from a very informed place, where he went back and like read the original, text, and he sticks by that original text, not the modern day incarnation of the Children of the Light, and he doesn't buy into their prejudices. And he becomes the model child of the light. Yeah. So ultimately, Galad is like a role model, really. Like, he's the guy who does his research and makes informed decisions.
And he's the one that shows himself to never waver from his particular philosophy of doing as much right as he can for himself and everyone around him, particularly everyone around him. Say what you want to about Galad. He was definitely introduced as a kind of uptight, kind of sneering, better than everyone else, holier than thou character, but he never wavers, not once, from his basic moral philosophy throughout the entirety of the series, and he finds a way to make that moral philosophy work, and at the same time have a huge influence on the last battle. And in that influence, I mean changing the entirety of the ideals of the Children of the Light. He actually did some positive for them. That's amazing. In and of itself, that accomplishment alone is amazing. So Galad has, 2 big thumbs up for Galad. I didn't expect to do that when I first met him, but 2 big thumbs up for Galad.
Agreed.
Yeah. Shall we talk about Oliver?
Okay.
Or do you want to save that one for the last episode? Because you could if you wanted to.
No, I want to talk about him now because there was one scene that I forgot about.
Okay.
Until reading this, because again, this book I have read the fewest amount of times out of all of the Wheel of Time. I read it the day it came out, and then I read it again a couple months later, and I haven't touched it since.
Yeah.
So there are things in here that I'm like, oh yeah, that's right, that I had forgotten about. And one of them that stood out the most to me here was the Ulver scene when they finally get the gateway back to Marilor, and Eravine reveals, that she's a dark
true
friend,
colors.
And all of this is happening, and Ulver's like, you know what, screw you, and he pulls the knife and he stabs her in the back.
That's the moment I have here.
Not Eravine, but the channeler.
The channeler, the Aes Sedai, yeah.
Yeah, and it was like, okay, that was one of those moments that stands out to me as a very Matt thing. And that's kind of why I think Brandon started understanding Matt more in this book. And it's not necessarily because of specifically the Matt scenes, but the way he wrote the characters around Matt. Talmanes, way better in this book than he was in Gathering Storm and Towers of Midnight. Much more like himself. Ulver, vintage Ulver here. And not only that, acting and growing as Ulver would, seeing Robert Jordan's Matt, not seeing Brandon Sanderson's Matt. Like, he acts the way you would expect for Ulver to act. And that was a good choice on Brandon's part. It shows that he was really gaining a better understanding as he was working on this, as he has worked through 900,000 words of text writing the Wheel of Time, that there's only so much understanding you can get reading until you start writing a character. And I recognize wholeheartedly that I'm over here being like an armchair author, telling you guys what I think Brandon did wrong, but it's a lot easier to criticize than it is to create. And I think it's really a note in Brandon's favor that he did learn. He didn't just sit back on his laurels after writing The Gathering Storm and say, oh no, all of you are wrong, I got Matt right. I just did a big reread of the series and I blogged about it and I know him and you guys are all wrong. No, he sat back and he received the criticism.
No, he owned it.
Yeah, very much so. And worked to get better and wrote 2 more books where he improved. And he not only improved Matt, but he improved the characters around Matt, because the way they react and learn from Matt became more organic and more natural to the Matt that Robert Jordan wrote.
Again, going back to something I mentioned, it absolutely does. This is something that can only have been written by somebody who was a fan of the Wheel of Time, and then grew on to bigger things. I was so pumped for Oliver in these scenes. If you had asked me beforehand, I really didn't think he was going to have a large part to play. I didn't know how that would have slipped past me, though, because it kind of seems obvious in retrospect. But I'm glad that it did, because the surprise was pleasant. I cheered for him so much. And this is the point that I wrote down, Drew, that you were talking about. When he jumped out from behind cover and he revealed that knife and he stabbed that channeler in the back. You know, he whispered that phrase in the old tongue, "It's time to toss the dice," and he freed Fael. I am going to formally propose this as the moment Oliver made his choice and stopped being a boy and became a man. Okay. I don't care if he's only 9 years old or so. This was the choice of a man. And I just wanted to say, right on, kid, which I guess is kind of oxymoron.
Yeah.
But I wish I could buy him a beer for that one. That was that was amazing. I loved what he did. And the horn sounder. What a perfect moment. What perfect writing. The boy raised a golden horn to his lips.
Yeah, so I had a weird experience with Ulver in the last battle here, because up to this point, you know, obviously I didn't know what was coming, but I did know about the Robert Jordan, quotes where people had asked him, "Oh, is Ulver Gai'don Kane?" And he like sort of lost his cool. Then he's like, "Look, I don't understand how this is still a thing. I don't understand how people are asking about this still. The timing doesn't work. Obviously, he's not." And then he goes on to say, "There's another plan for him. He's not just a red herring." And that always stuck in my head. And that when we started getting these Ulver points of view, I was like, "Oh, that's right. Robert Jordan said there was something in store for him."
Something in store. I had no context for that. I was not ready for
but
that.
I never imagined, because I was too dumb to think about the fact that Matt did die.
Technically, he died at one point that we weren't ready for.
Yeah, the horn bond was broken in Camelin.
We thought I was on the tree, perhaps.
Well, no, I never thought it was.
No, sorry, not we as in you and I, but we as the collective fandom. A lot of the fans thought, "Oh, it must have been on the tree if he's going to have died." That was the prophecy.
That was another thing that I also, because I stayed up on the Q&As, where Robert Jordan very equivocally said, "No, he almost died on the tree. He didn't die."
Oh yeah, good to know that the man himself made a very clear distinction there.
Well, I mean, there's a quote later in this book that puts the nail in that coffin.
Yeah, for sure. But I'm glad that Robert Jordan himself,
the expectation was there for me, like, okay, what is Ulver going to do? And then I wondered, seeing him knife that channel back, I'm like, okay, he's the one who engineers the return of the horn to Matt. And then the twist happens. I'm like, oh my gosh, no.
Was there a moment? I want to ask this. This is something I hadn't actually considered to ask, but now in the moment I've just considered it. Were you concerned in that moment when Oliver raised the horn to his lips? Were you concerned in that moment, or any part of you, that this was perhaps something going horribly wrong?
No. I vividly remember him raising the horn to his lips and me thinking, actually, that's a pretty good idea. Whether it works or not, you're at least, it's the sound of the horn of Valir, and some people present on this battlefield have heard that sound before, and they will know, hey, we got to get to this sound.
Okay. So you're looking at it more from an authorial point of view at that point. For me, I'm going to offer something converse. I thought in that moment, I was looking at it and going, oh my god, that's not right. But then, I considered what I was thinking 12 books previously, as Matt was doing the same thing on Tommen Head, raising the horn to his lips, because at that point I had thought, well, it's the Horn of Valir, it's a huge deal against the Shadow, it has to be the Dragon Reborn's weapon. And I hadn't, like, when Matt was doing it in The Great Hunt, I thought, oh my god, something is going terribly wrong. So in that moment, in A Memory of Light, when Oliver did that, at first, I had the initial reaction of starting to get indignant, like, oh no, something seriously terrible is happening. But then I remembered exactly how I felt 12 books previously and went, oh my god, that was perfect.
Let
that
he
was
who
brilliant.
would sound me think not of glory, but only of salvation.
Oh, oh my god. I hadn't even considered that. The actual quote. That's amazing. It's so well done, and I'm just so glad that Oliver, of all people, was the one to finally place lip upon bronze. That was amazing.
Nice.
Yes, thank you.
Ooh.
Alright, so now comes a moment that I've been waiting for, not only since we started recording the podcast well over a year ago, but I've been waiting for this moment for 10 years, maybe longer. And this is a moment where I get to rub something in, not to you, Drew, because you believed in me the whole time, but a bunch of faceless assholes in the Wheel of Time Facebook forums that existed back then. I don't remember if it was in like the big Wheel of Time Facebook group or even if it's that old. I just searched before we started the episode today. I couldn't find any forums at all in that group. But there was one day, many years ago now, when I decided to post a theory idea in what was definitely a Facebook group at the time, a Wheel of Time discussion forum. And that's all I remember about where this happened. But my theory brought forward something that I'd noticed about a particular line in The Shadow Rising, Book 4. And this particular line was from Lanfear, no less. It was in Chapter 9, Decisions. I may have actually drawn a point about this in our episodes in The Shadow Rising Part 1. I'm not sure if I remembered to do that at the time. It was right before the stone stands. Lanfear corners Rand, and she reveals her true identity. And for the first time, she offers to rule the world beside him. And in that little speech of hers, she makes reference to Kalendor. She sneers at it. Well, okay, she's actually sneering at Rand's power-wrought Sword of Flame, but the context of the conversation was Kalendor at that point. And she says precisely about that sa'angreal, only 2 more powerful were ever created that a man can use. One I know still exists. Now, my theory that I proposed was, oh my god, guys, there is another sa'angreal. There's one more powerful than Kalendor out there. And I got flamed. Every single comment was some variation of, dude, she's talking about the Shoiden Cal. There's 2 of them, duh. But what I kept on insisting...
She specifically says...
Yes, go on.
2 that a man can use.
Yes, she specifically... I said, why did she specify that a man can use? And everybody in that frickin' forum, especially 2 or 3 particularly stubborn guys, just kept repeating, well, Rand has both the access keys. He gave Nynaeve the female version of the, to cleanse the source. It's still in his possession. He used it for his own purpose.
So I actually remember this thread.
Do you?
I don't remember which group it was in, but I remember one. I remember the guy who brought up. He's like, "Oh, he still has the 2 keys," and I pointed out, I was like, Rand didn't have the keys when this conversation took place.
That's a good point. I hadn't considered that.
There were a couple other people in that thread who pointed out, they were like, "Oh, well, I think Robert Jordan just didn't have the magic worked out at this point," and as a like a piece of evidence, they brought up how in The Dragon Reborn, Swan talks about Kalendor and says that to the Wonder Girl, she's like, in your hands you could like level the walls of Tar-Valon with Kalendor, and how that's proof that he planned sa'angreal to be used by anybody early on. And it was like, oh, come on, dude. Like,
yeah,
clearly Swan wasn't saying, like, you can use Kalendor. She's saying, like, just to make a point about how powerful this thing is.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah. What got me more was, I think somebody in that thread had also mentioned, well, even if there was I'm listening to my internet troll voice. Even if there was a sa'angreal more powerful than Kalendor, I highly doubt we'd not have heard about it until now. But because I was being so openly doubted by so many people with what I thought was pretty good logic, I may or may not have gotten a little indignant, which led to a lot of them attacking me for being what I can now admit was and is a bit of a pretentious asshole. But guess what, mother? Fast forward years later, and you can kiss my ass.
Oh my gosh.
This Sa'angreal exists. It's called Sakarnin. Yep. Holy crap, I can't articulate the satisfaction that I had when reading that Demon Dread had a Sa'angreal that was even more powerful than Kalendor. I made the effort to try and find this post for today so I can give more precise information, and maybe to call out the idiots that were doubting me, not by name, but just by what they were saying. But I couldn't find it, so sorry everyone. I know you were all...
I don't remember which group it was in. It might have
definitely
been in the Screw You All, I Love the Wheel of Time group.
Maybe. It was definitely on a forum in the some sort of Wheel of Time group, discussion group on Facebook.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Okay.
I just wanted to say, hey everybody, I was right. I'm just going to be selfish right now and point that out. So.
Yeah, I can't blame you at all. I will and have crowed about theories that I got right that people doubted.
Yep. Really, Egwene's death. I already talked about that earlier, but there's one tiny thing I had forgotten to mention about that scene with Egwene's death and why it really hit me as hard as it did. And really, it was because of another character's reaction, and that was Rand's reaction. Her death really started to hit me hard when Rand was in the pit of doom / outside of the pattern going, not her. Please, not her.
Mm-hmm.
By the way, Michael Kramer, probably my favorite male audiobook author, delivered that one perfectly. Oh my god, the amount of pain that he managed to put in Rand's voice when that happened. Amazing. Nice. Absolutely amazing. Yeah. And then after that we get to Land's duel with Demon Dread in... Oh my goodness.
So one thing that we haven't talked about, but it's kind of been in the back of my mind, that I want to get your response on, and our listeners as well. Let us know, in the conversation. This entire chapter happens in what is essentially twilight.
Okay.
It starts in the morning, but the sun, there's no light from the sun. And it's easy for me to forget that because when I'm picturing things in my head, I just naturally picture, whatever daytime. I know it's daytime, so I picture the sun's out, maybe a couple clouds in the sky. But there were a couple of points in this reading through it that would always drag me back where I'd be like, oh, that's right, it's dark. And one of those was the duel with Galad, where there are lanterns shining, illuminating the scene in the darkness.
Yeah.
And then again with Lan, where there's this image of all the fire arrows coming down and carving an arc into the lines for him to
let's light away
a landing strip for him to cruise in. Yeah, and was it the same way for you, or do you just always have that image of this being dark in your head?
It was the exact opposite for me.
Okay.
The entirety of the book, the only scene to me that felt like it had sunlight, there was Marilor, when Rand was originally making his declaration of his requirements. Everything else from that point forward, from the time that Elaine was observing her city burning to the very end of the book, every single minute to me felt like it was in darkness.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah, so there were a few scenes that like outside of Kyrian, when I think of Andrel opening the gateway to spew lava.
Oh no, the lava to me is shining glowing light and flickering lights on everything around it. I
never thought about it like that. But it's so much cooler when you do.
Yes, it absolutely is. That's why I thought it that way, because this is the coolest thing I'd ever read.
Yeah,
it was the coolest thing I'd ever read. The secret's out,
everybody. Rob Santos is
I'm about 12 years younger and way, way, way dumber.
That was not what I thought you were going to say there.
What did you think I was going to say?
Way, way, way more Canadian.
Oh yeah. I don't know. Am I that Canadian to listen to? Do I sound that Canadian?
Sometimes.
So I imagine when I speak very quickly or when I get drunk, which is a lot of time on this episode. So I can actually on these episodes, so I can see that actually. It's a good point. Yeah, no. Definitely. Demon Dread versus Lan. Best way to end the last battle. Well, I guess we do have listener questions we can get onto now. I'm sure I know I've brought up a couple of them at this point. But I know we've had a couple more in the interim here. Let's take a look here. Definitely. Oh. Actually, this first one is a spoiler. I can't actually say it. From Mark Geller. Oh. It's about Rand. I'm not going to say what it is. Mark Warren. So half of his we've already established, and half of his we can continue to establish. Mark Warren asks, do you think it works as one chapter? Thoughts on the various deaths? Did Brigitte, in that part in particular, devastate you on your first read?
Oh my gosh. I was horrified.
Really?
In that scene, when Hanlon and the other Dark Friends show up and just, like, slaughter everybody, and Hanlon just, like, beheads Brigitte, and then it ends... That scene ends with him being like, oh, we can just carve out the babies.
See, that's amazing to me that you call him Hanlon.
Horrified.
To me, it's Millar. It's like... That's who he is. Hanlon is just the facade.
Oh no, it's David Hanlon is who he is. Doylan Mellar was his cover name.
Really? I thought it was the other way around, but I totally admit I did not look that up in any way. I could be totally wrong.
He's David Hanlon before he's Doylan Mellar.
Okay.
Mellar was his cover name in the Royal Guard.
Got you.
Yeah. He's introduced as David Hanlon in, I believe...
Oh, I know he's introduced as David Hanlon, but I thought perhaps that was his spy name. That was his cover name for the Shadow. Got you. Okay.
No. Yeah. But anyway, yeah, I was horrified by that scene. I was like... That was, in fact, maybe more than anything else. That scene felt like the low point of this chapter, where, like, everything was falling apart.
Was it perhaps in the indifference with which it was performed?
No, because he just like it was the personal threat to Elaine. Where so much had been made of Min's viewing, saying the babies will be healthy, and Elaine using that as, like, you know, scripture. And saying, oh, I have plot armor because of this, essentially. And then here we're presented with a situation where that is no longer plot armor. And this is, you know, after so many major characters have died. And you're like, are we really going to go here? Holy cow.
See, there's a particular moment in, I forget who did the read-through or the reactions for Tor.com. I think it was Leigh Butler, who at one point... it was
definitely Lee. It was Lee, yeah.
Lee? I'm sorry, is that how it's pronounced? Lee? Oh,
yeah,
I
Lee.
thought it was Leigh. That's that's my bad. Absolutely. There's at one point where it was said that oh god, how exactly was it put? It was, this is the point at which things are really going to start to suck. And I read that and I went, oh no. Oh, am I going to absolutely know this moment when it comes? And my god, did I know that moment when it comes. I do believe Brigitte might have been in that exact moment. Was actually, hold on, wasn't there a follow-up? Wasn't there a follow-up in which Lee actually explained which scene broke down to which particular reaction?
Oh, that rings a bell.
I swear to God, there was a follow-up, wasn't there?
It's been 7 freaking years.
I know,
I think there was, where she said, although, or maybe it was, because I know there was like a beta reader spoiler-free reactions thing for Oathbringer, and then maybe they revealed which scenes.
I thought spoiler-free reactions were like a common thing for like Tor big releases at this point.
Oh, I mean, they pretty much are. I'm saying with the follow-up thing, I can't remember if it was a Memory of Light.
Oh, the follow-up,
the Oathbringer one. But I think you're right. I think it was Lee doing.
It had to be, because I'm pretty sure Lee said that, for example, one of her earlier points was Rand pulling the seals out of his pocket. Like, really? In his pocket? That's where he was keeping them?
Mm-hmm.
I think it was...
Mm-hmm.
I do think that was it. But yeah, I think, like, the last battle had to be the point at which that she wrote that particular reaction, because, oh my god. And the death of Brigitte is so emblematic of that entire sentiment of having to accept that, oh my god, we are not going to have any plot armor, we're not going to have any protections against what's coming. You know, the indifference with which Doylan Millar / David Hanlon just beheaded Brigitte and was so smug about it.
And, you know, what made it probably the worst for me was how just a little bit previously Brigitte revealed she's like, I don't remember anything.
Yeah, she had just hit rock bottom. She had just previously hit rock bottom.
Yeah, because there were just so many things about this one particular scene that were, as you said, rock bottom for characters that A, are important, and B, we care about. And like you can make an argument that Gawain didn't go out at rock bottom. Egwene didn't go out at rock bottom. But here, Brigitte does, and Elaine is about to. Because there's no way Elaine's gonna survive a battlefield C-section. Like, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, Joy Kristen Allen, from whom we've had a few questions previously.
Yeah.
What's up,
Hi,
Joy? She asks, after all the years of waiting to get to this one chapter, was it worth it? And which parts did you think worked the best? Now, I realize we've been loosely beating around this entire bush the entire time, but there is that last stipulation there. I want to ask, what part did you think worked the best?
Oh, man.
This is from Joy Kristen Allen.
What part worked the best? That is a tough question with such a big chapter.
I ambushed you with that one, didn't I? Well, she ambushed us with this. No, I asked for it. She didn't do any ambushing.
What worked the best? It's tempting to say Lan versus Demandred, but I actually can't. And we'll talk about that more next week.
I want to throw some knee-jerk reactions out there. I want to say Lan lighting the way for Tam lighting the way for Lan with the fiery arrows. Damn it. I want to say Egwene going out like a boss. I don't know. That's a really good question. Maybe we come to that in the next episode.
Egwene landed really well.
Oh, hell yeah, it did. Despite how much I bitched about her, Egwene went out in the most badass, respectable way. And I'm going to drink to Egwene in a second here after I pour another one.
Man, this is...
I'll tell you what, we come back to this
really
in the
tough.
same episode, but we give it until the end of the episode to answer it. Give you some time to figure it out. Sound good?
Yeah, that sounds like a good idea.
Okay, so we have another question from C. Roughton. And we already answered one. The first half of this, I'd like to hear you guys explore Egwene's death. But the second half really, really intrigues me. I want to get your take on this, Drew. Logain searching for the scepter that Demandred gave to Taim. Logain being in somewhat of a shady gray area, what would he have done had he gotten it?
What would he have done? Ooh.
Yeah, what would have been the fallout of that had Logain actually decided to go for the power and go for Sakarnan?
I have always thought that had he gotten Sakarnan, there would have been war between the towers after the last battle.
Yes, yep. Yeah, I kind of agree with that, yeah.
And that because he didn't, and because he is forced to gain a different sort of understanding of power and adapt a different kind of role going forward, that there is a unification, not immediately in the future, but down the road.
I think that would have turned him at that pivotal and character identifying moment down the wrong path into somebody completely different. Yeah. And I fully agree with what you said. That would have absolutely led to war between the towers and the downfall of humanity as we knew it.
Yeah, like I don't think it would have turned him into a dark friend or something like
that.
But
just a power-hungry tyrant, perhaps.
Yeah, exactly. A power-hungry tyrant.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is something that we might actually want to discuss on another episode, because this doesn't really have a lot to do with the Wheel of Time series as a whole, but it's also something fascinating to discuss. C. Roughton also proposes, he says, I feel like they might try to merge Logain and Taim in the Prime series. Do we want to talk about that at a later episode? Don't need a reaction from you right now.
No.
What do you think?
We can talk about it right now.
Yeah?
I don't think they will. I think if anything is going to happen with merging, we're going to actually get Taim Andred.
Okay. Well, yeah. That seems quite obvious considering the fandom's expectation beforehand.
So Rafe has already been on the record as saying he's expanding Logain. He thinks Logain deserves a more thorough establishment as a character early in the series. He likes Logain a lot as a character, so I don't see them combining them. But
I think there's too much to be gained.
I could see
pitting them against one another myself.
Yeah, I could see a Taim Andred reversion where maybe they make the clues more subtle in the whatever season is Lord of Chaos, and go down that route where Demandred killed Asmodean and Demandred takes over the Black Tower, and they do something else with the Sharans. And in fact, I kind of hope they do that.
Yeah. I can see that, because that's how I always thought of it as a kid, and I'm sure as a lot of people thought of it on their first read through, that Taim and Demandred were actually a thing, that they were this one and the same. So what you're saying, I guess, if I want to summarize what you're saying, if I can, is that you're not so much on the Taim main. How would you pronounce the other two? I don't know. You're not so much on that train as you are on the Taim Andred train, right?
Wait. What are you saying?
What C. Roughton said. No. C. Roughton was talking about Logain and Taim instead of Taim and Demandred.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Yeah. So I was just trying to come up with like a merger between Logain and Taim, and I came up with Logaim.
Logaim?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
or Tyain.
Sense.
I like Tyain. Yeah.
No, Logaim is better, I think.
Yeah, Logaim. Yeah, that sounds more like Forsaken-esque.
Oh.
Yeah. So let's see here. C. Roughton, Kyle Pollock, Gawain attacking Demandred, heroic or selfish. We've already covered that. Oh, and just the last one, which is not really a question for us to address today, but something I thought would be entertaining to address right now. Rashid Kurugli, what's up, Rashid? He's a patron. How's it going? He says, I have no questions, just tremendous sadness that in a few weeks it will be over. But what I responded already with is, the podcast is never over, only our read-through of one series will be. Do you like Brandon Sanderson?
And I will also say, this is our read of the main series. We will have a future episode or two on New Spring. We already have an episode on Strike at Shale Ghoul that I know for a fact not many people have listened to. We will be doing future episodes on the deleted sequences from A Memory of Light, those being River of Souls and A Fire Within the Ways.
Yep.
We are not done. We are never done with the Wheel of Time.
And just growing up as such huge fans of the Wheel of Time and being influenced in such a huge part as we have been, there is no way that we are not going to be continuously bringing up Robert Jordan in almost every single conversation we have going forward, right? I mean,
pretty much.
Robert Jordan is such a huge, seminal part of our upbringing in terms of our reading that, I mean, he's always in the back of our minds. Yeah, excellent. And that
and who knows?
Wraps up.
Maybe if we go way down the rabbit hole, we'll end up doing some Robert Jordan Conan books or the Reagan O'Neill.
Oh my god! Wouldn't that be a trip?
That maybe for Patreon. Down
Warrior of the Altai was already a trip. I would love to do something like that in the future with the Conan books.
I kind of wish the further removed we get from Warrior of the Altai, the more I wish there had been a sequel to that.
Really?
Just to see how ridiculous it got. Because by the end of that book, there was some really ridiculous stuff coming into it.
There was a lot of big things happening at the end there. Yeah.
But
so that wraps up everything I want to say on the last battle for now.
So I want to just talk a little bit about, like, pull it back out to the writing perspective here.
Okay.
And, you know, as I promised at the beginning of the episode, I wanted to talk about the direction of the plot and who made which decisions.
Yeah.
I don't know everything, and I'm just going off of a few interview quotes I've seen here and there with this. But as far as I understand it, Robert Jordan left no direction on how to handle Gareth Bryan and Swan. That was a decision made by Harriet and Brandon.
Okay.
And he didn't leave any direction on how Egwene was going to end up.
What? Now that surprises me. That surprises me a lot.
Like, he didn't say, like, oh, Egwene's going to go invent the Flame of Tar-Valon and take out Taim.
He didn't even specify if there was an opposite to the Balefire?
I don't know about that. I just know that, like, the direction for her arc ending wasn't
because of the fact that there
specified.
was an opposite to that weave, and the fact that it was called the Flame of Tar-Valon. I thought that might have been something that was inserted by Robert Jordan so much earlier. I don't know. That was the impression that I got, early, at least.
Yeah, no, it is. From as much as I understand it, like, he didn't leave much about her character after what we got in Gathering Storm.
With her consolidating her power in the tower.
Yeah. And that he had some, like, skeleton notes, but he didn't have anything, like, fully fleshed out. And so that is one thing that I wanted to highlight, how so many of these deaths here were the choices of Brandon Sanderson and Harriet and Team Jordan in general. And I think they did just overall an astounding job
On specifically choosing the deaths.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can agree with that.
Yeah, like, to me, I wish Swan had gotten, more time, but I understand the reasoning behind how she died, and ultimately, especially with 7 years of hindsight, I can't complain. Especially when we're going to be getting into the Black Company here soon, and I won't complain about any of the deaths in that series, and they are very much like this, because that's a series written by a man like Robert Jordan, who served in the military, who saw action, who saw death,
really,
and understood how just sometimes in war people die, where you're doing your own thing, you're staying alive, and you turn around and your buddy is dead on the ground over there.
It seems callous. It seems poignant, but it's thematically appropriate for the subject at hand. Yeah.
Yeah, and on that Black Company topic, obviously we're going to get much more into this, but, like,
oh boy,
the reason that series was written was because Glenn Cook came back from his tours of duty and thought to himself, I love fantasy books, I love sci-fi, but where's the fantasy for the soldiers? We have stories about heroes and kings and prophesied chosen ones, and, like, and we don't have anything for the frontline soldier. What is it like being the Gondoran knight out on the field of Pelennor fighting against Sauron's orcs? What is it like being, the random Andorran guard fighting against the Trollocs pouring out of the gateway in Camelin? Like, and so he decided to write a series about that rather than about the Tolkien hero's journey, Joseph Campbell, like, fantasy. And I think it's going to be really nice for us to transition from the Wheel of Time into the Black Company, because there's a good bridge there. Both Robert Jordan and Glenn Cook fought in Vietnam. both saw combat.
Oh, it's the same
both
war.
Understood.
Even.
Yeah, both understood the same experiences, and yet they both came out of that experience and wrote 2 very different series with some of the same underlying themes. So we're going to have a lot of fun in a few weeks here. We're not going straight into The Black Company after A Memory of Light. We're going to do Shorefall. I don't know if we've made this announcement yet, but we're going to do Shorefall by Robert Jackson Bennett, the sequel to Foundry Side, which comes out. We're recording this on April 19th. I believe that comes out April 24th.
That soon? That soon? I thought it was like a month still.
No.
We're talking like 5 days, bruh?
It's like this week.
Oh, man, I'm excited again.
April 21st, excuse me. It comes
out
on
What? It's
Tuesday.
the day after tomorrow? It's literally 26 hours from now?
Oh, crap. Okay, well, I'm going to just announce this right now. I failed as a reviewer. I got an advanced review copy of this, and I'm only 58% of the way through the book, and I meant to have my review, like the book done and my review written.
Uh-oh.
Okay, well, I know what I'm doing the rest of today.
Let's wrap this up, my man.
Holy crap. Okay, yeah. So anyway, as far as the deaths go in the last battle and in A Memory of Light, it is something that works for me, and it shows an appreciation for the mind of Robert Jordan that so many of these deaths were not his deaths. They were, or like at least the way they were executed. You know, he may have just had notes like, you know, Swan and Garth Bryn die. And then Brandon, working with Harriet and Maria and Alan, came up with the way they're going to die, you know, and it feels genuine to what Robert Jordan would have done.
Okay. Yeah, no, I definitely agree with that. Shall we head into the final draft? Okay, I'll start since I have what is, as to be expected at this point, the least interesting entry for today. I have started to drink small amounts again because I'm in a quarantine. I'm doing some more writing. I'm doing a lot more hobbyist kind of stuff, gardening. And I decided to go upon inspiration from watching Trailer Park Boys recently. Drew, you told me you were getting into Trailer Park Boys very recently. Have you continued to watch? Not to talk about the show itself, but just to ask roughly.
I think I'm...
Sorry, what season was that? You cut out here for a second.
So it's into season 2 right now?
So, okay, yeah, got you. I'm drinking for today what I have since learned was the whiskey that they used on that show for Jim Leahy, the Trailer Park supervisor in that show. So this is, even though it's always been blurred out on the show, this is a authentic, cheap, Trailer Park-esque Canadian whiskey, and this is Alberta Premium. And in terms of how it tastes, I mean, it tastes like a very cheap whiskey.
Okay.
I wouldn't recommend this to anybody looking for a particularly savory or refined experience. But for the price, it's just right. And for drinking little bits at a time while you're talking about an episode that you've been waiting to glow about and to party about for a long time, it was still pretty appropriate. So Alberta Premium, cheap whiskey, good stuff, mixed with a splash of water like I normally do with the Scotch. And I can't wait to drink what I'm going to be drinking for the next episode, because it's going to be something that I have drank before. I have brought on the episode before, but I do reserve it for special occasions for a reason. So can't wait to talk about that one again. So Alberta Premium for today.
All right. Nice. Yeah, so I actually
you mentioned that.
have been drinking 2 different beers over the course of this episode. Since
we made one episode about 2 hours. How did we do this?
It looks like my expectation was right. And the beer I was going to bring in, I realized was only a 12-ounce can, so I was like, well, I should bring in a second one. The first one I drank, though, which was my second option, It's from Four Hands Brewing Company.
A what now
It
and
is
what
a
stout?
Peanut butter and jelly milk stout.
I heard you. I'm just asking indignantly why.
Peanut butter and jelly milk stout. So, they describe it as a fresh take on their milk stout. This new variation is brewed with the same peanut butter and chocolate as the original, but now includes a huge dose of raspberry. And it is 7.5%. I have to admit, I was super disappointed by this beer. I've heard really good things about it, and I was expecting a lot of peanut butter. I was expecting a lot of chocolate. I was expecting like a really full mouthfeel. I got none of those things. It was basically like raspberry juice. Yeah, unfortunately disappointing. But this is Absence of Light by Four Hands Brewing Company.
Andrew McCaffrey. How are you going to follow that up? How are you going to follow that up? Tell me. Just blow my mind. I'm going to
I'm gonna follow up
waiting in the water.
with
I'm waiting for the final blow. Let's hear it. Let's hear it.
I am going to follow it up with a bourbon barrel aged hot cocoa stout from Temperance Brewing Company.
Uh-oh.
Which was unfortunately also very disappointing. This was a licorice bomb. It was pure Twizzlers.
I do like Twizzlers.
I did not get much cocoa or marshmallow out of it at all.
Stuff, man.
Yeah, this one was a little disappointing. This is the 12-ounce can. It's a 12.3% ABV bourbon barrel-aged stout. But it is called Meets Right.
Okay. I will admit to having liked the first title a lot better, but I can see why this one is so much more thematically appropriate for what we're talking about, because this is the ultimate decision. This is the ultimate battle. This is where everything is culminating into an example of just that.
It is.
Oh,
indeed.
Man.
Man. I mean, I've been through this on previous episodes. I've talked to Rob about this offline. Just wait till next week. If I ever beat the beer I bring in next week, I will be surprised. Because it's the name is perfect.
Exquisite.
And the beer itself,
would you say,
is like the most hype beer. So I've never tasted it before. The beer that I'm bringing on, I hope it is as good as it is advertised. For any of our beer nerds who follow us or beer drinkers, there's an app called Untapped where you can check in beers and rate them out of 5. And if you want to get a little glimpse in advance, follow me on Untapped. You can see which beers I check in every Sunday. But on Untapped, with the way the ratings work, right? So they aggregate global ratings, and you can rate on a scale of 0.25 from 0 to 5. And, so for instance, this Meets Right, I just gave it a 3.75 out of 5. I gave the peanut butter and jelly milk stout a 3.25. It is very difficult to get a global rating above about 4.2, 4.25. Like, you need everybody who's drinking your beer to really like it. The beer I'm bringing in next week is currently sitting at a 4.66 global rating. It is one of the highest rated beers I've ever gotten my hands on. And the name is perfect. So
all right.
I am
I'm extremely excited to freak out in an undue manner and embarrass myself once again.
Yeah. So leaving that little teaser for what's to come.
Yep.
This has been episode 64 of the Inking Out Loud podcast. Next up, as we said, is the final Memory of Light episode, our final main Wheel of Time sequence. We will be covering chapter 38 through the
I don't
end.
know what to say right now. Like, we are...
Oh, man.
I think the Wheel of Time, the
coming.
Eye of the World, was episode 27, 28? I want to say 28. No, 26 was Foundry side.
I want to say 26.
25 was Calamity. Yeah.
But it's somewhere in there. Was it? Okay.
What are the odds of that?
Okay, then it would be
28
was memory, or oh my gosh, 20. No, 28
no, Rune of Kings was 33.
Was Eye of the World, because 27 was Rune of Kings.
No, we did Rune of Kings in between the Dragon Reborn and the Shadow Rising.
Eye of the World.
Yeah, dude.
Holy crap! Did we really?
I know that for a fact.
Wow.
Yeah, Foundry side to the Eye of the World Part 1.
We went straight from Foundry side into Wheel of Time?
Am I blowing your mind?
No way.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, you're right. So, no.
23 was Steelheart. 24 was... Actually, 21 was Arcady Martine. 22 was Arcady Martine. 23 was Steelheart. 24 was Firefight. 25 was Calamity. 26, Foundry side, Part 1. Oh, wait, Foundry side had 2 parts.
Did we? Okay. Did I mess something up here? Okay, so I'm going back through. I messed something up. We just discovered this in the middle of our outro. We just discovered on SoundCloud the Eye of the World. Oh no, never mind. We didn't mess it up. I forgot the way SoundCloud has things layered. If there's a spotlight episode, which we have Eye of the World Part 1 as. It doesn't appear in the normal queue. So when I was scrolling through, it went from 26 to 28. And I was like, wait, what the heck? Did we misnumber? But it's because Eye of the World Part 1 didn't appear. So yes,
we've been doing it for a long time. That's the point I was trying to get across. We've been doing it for a long time. And then it's going to be episode 65.
Yeah, no joke.
Granted, not every single episode in the interim was Wheel of Time based. But it took us that long to get through what we thought was a justified, or even remotely close, review of Robert Jordan's main body of work. Yeah, go ahead.
And I want to just put this out here.
I still have radio. I just poured some
raise a glass.
Be able to hear it
if you have something in hand, because
today
we were supposed to be recording these episodes.
Yeah. So this is where
Jordan Con in Atlanta.
Yeah. This is where I tell everybody that I had previously beforehand.
Yeah.
Though I had been bugged a lot of times in the many years previously that I've known Drew to go to Jordan Con. I haven't actually traveled to meet Drew in person or been to Jordan Con yet, despite the fact that I've known Drew for 10 years now or more. And now we have a whole group that we talk in. And that we're a huge part of this. That we're all huge friends in this group, very close friends. And this was the first year that I was supposed to go down there. I had bought tickets. I bought a plane ticket there and back from Toronto to Atlanta, and from Atlanta to Toronto. I had reserved the hotel for 4 nights, and this was supposed to be the year that I showed up and surprised everyone, without telling anybody that I was going to show up. And then the Rona happened.
Yep.
Right now, we are supposed to be in a hotel room in Atlanta, Georgia.
Then it happened. Yeah, right now, we would be sitting at CouchCon recording probably a Wheel of Time retrospective episode with a bunch of special guests. And that brings us to what I was saying earlier, where, we may be ending A Memory of Light.
I like that.
But we are never done with the Wheel of Time, because when we go to Jordan Con next year, the special episodes with all the special guests we were going to do are going to happen next year. So, keep your calendars marked for, whatever, April 24th of 2021.
That's going to be a pretty epic weekend.
Oh, man. Oh, yeah, that Jordan Con, and I'm telling you, for any of our listeners, if you haven't been to Jordan Con, check it out. It is just an absolute blast. Super fun time. Not only is there a bunch of great Wheel of Time content there, but there are other tracks. There's a whole Sanderson track. There's a workshopping track where you can work on costumes. You can learn how to make chainmail. They literally had a chainmail making workshop last year. They have a writer's track, an art track. They have a whole art show, costume contest. I mean, it's incredible. And it's also a relatively small con. I think the most attendees they've ever had was just shy of 900. So when you show up, you're going to...
I've experienced this from the outside for 10 years now, and I still feel like part of the family. And I can't wait to actually experience this in person. So, I mean, for next year, my plane's already paid for there and back, and guess what? My ticket's already paid for as well. So next year, I can't wait to see you there, everyone.
Yep. Absolutely. So that said, we're going to move from some downer news to some good news, at least for us, and hopefully for all of you guys.
Yeah, we did.
This weekend, we hit our first stretch goal on Patreon, and that means we have some special content coming your way if you're a supporter on Patreon. We're going to have a very entertaining video dropping in your inboxes. Especially if you're a Stormlight Archive Cosmere fan of Rob Santos reading the end of Words of Radiance for the first time. And beyond that, though, I am also going to be dropping some special new fiction, short fiction of my own, as a thank you for all of you and your support on Patreon. This helps us pay Pat. Like, as of this stretch goal, we can completely pay Pat from Patreon. Nothing's coming out of our pockets to pay him anymore. That is a huge, huge thing for us. Our next stretch goal, we need to pay Danny for her art completely, with our Patreon. We've been saying it from the beginning. We believe in paying people for what they work on. We're not here to make money on this podcast. That's not why we're doing this. We're here to bring content to you guys, and the people who are supporting us in this, Pat doing the sound engineering, Danny doing the incredible art. We want them to get what they deserve for all of their hard work. And you guys are really coming out to help that happen. So thank you. As always, I am your host, Drew McCaffrey. With me is my co-host, Rob Santos. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you next week for the end of A Memory of Light.